Hi, I'm Peter Capaldi. I play the Doctor, and you're watching EMS Productions.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome along to this week's Doctor Who review. And I've certainly been looking forward to this one because it is for the truly incredible Heaven Sent. Well, of course, this is a fairly unique episode as well as being so brilliant. It is pretty much the first time that we've ever had. It's pretty much a one-hander, as close as you're going to get, frankly, without in Doctor Who, I think, because it's basically just Peter Capaldi for 55 minutes. Yes, there's the Veil, but he's not really a speaking part, so I don't count him. Clara in the Doctor's dreams, or in the Doctor's mind, has a couple of lines, but again, that's nothing major, and you have the kid at the end on Gallifrey who doesn't say anything. So it's pretty much just Peter Capaldi. And, well, really, that's all you need to make a good episode. You just need Stephen Moffat's script and Peter Capaldi, and you're sorted, as this episode proved. And, I mean, I can't really do justice how brilliant Peter Capaldi's performance in this episode was. For him to be able to carry a whole episode on his own so magnificently and just pull it off so brilliantly is such a difficult thing to do. And I think a lot of the previous Doctors would have struggled to pull off that sort of a performance and really just take control of the episode the whole way through. Every scene's with him. Everything's with him. There's never anything else. It's all about him, and clearly that's put some people off. I know some of my family weren't so keen on it because it was just him for the whole episode, and they're casual fans. They didn't really appreciate it so much, and so they kind of just thought, oh, can't we just have something else rather than just him all the time? But for us proper fans, and as critics have been saying, he really does pull it off brilliantly. And, well, this review is probably going to be full of repetitive superlatives because I just can't think of enough superlatives to describe how good this episode is and all the features of it. So apologies if it becomes slightly repetitive in some of the wording that I use, but there's just not enough superlatives really for this episode, I think it's fair to say. And obviously, as well as Peter Capaldi being amazing in this, you've got to say hats off to Stephen Moffat for this script. He said he was taking a risk with this episode, and I think he said it was his most challenging script ever, which doesn't surprise me, trying to write something like that. Get it all to work together and work as a good story when it's only got one character, basically. Must have been a seriously tough job. And whatever you think of Moffat, and I know there's a lot of criticism of Moffat for many different things and the way he writes and all this sort of stuff, but I think it's fair to say that for 97-98% of people, this script is brilliant, and this is probably his best script, and has turned into pretty much his best episode as well. I think it's better than Blink, better than Day of the Doctor, better than Listen, all these sort of Moffat classics, if you like, and stuff. I think that this script sort of beats all those and shows that Moffat can write absolutely brilliant scripts, and I think he does quite often, but I know a lot of people think that a lot of his scripts are meh, which I disagree with a bit, but it sort of shows that he can write lots of widely popular scripts, if you like. He can write them, just he doesn't write them very often. He then goes and writes Hellbent, so yeah, it's Moffat's such a great writer, just he doesn't always pull it off, if you like, I think. But in this episode, he completely does, and it works so brilliantly. Coming into the episode itself, we have, coming off last week's cliffhanger where Clara's dead, just been killed by the Raven. She's faced the Raven, and the Doctor has been teleported magically off somewhere by Ashilda's teleport device on his wrist. And, oh, I wonder where he's gone. And actually, we didn't know where he's gone. It was a nice little sort of mystery. It wasn't obvious straight away where he was. I mean, clearly watching it back now, the whole mechanical castle kind of gives a fairly strong hint as to what it is. The bit of golden look as well of it, in room 12 in particular, and this kind of stuff, kind of hints at where you actually are. But first time round, it's a brilliant watch on that part, because it doesn't give it away too quickly, I think, which is really nice. And well, we sort of start off with quite a mysterious, the opening scene, all this sort of the Doctor talking about this thing that follows you forever, basically explaining the Veil, really, this creature that is born and we're next to you and will always follow you around everywhere, and eventually you will die, basically. And it's all a nice sort of I'm sure that's based off some sort of poem or story or idea or something. I'm sure I've read about it online about that. I can't remember exactly, but that was sort of nice, sort of slightly sinister and sort of just building up, getting all the shots of all the different parts of the sort of the mechanical castle to really sort of just set the scene for it and set up the episode. And then and we just see that shot of the Doctor's hand, or a hand at that point, just dropping and disintegrating on the ground. And I know there were a few people who sort of picked up straight away, oh, that's probably the Doctor's hand. But I did not pick it up until a fair way in the episode that has actually been... I think I kind of, when I first watched it, I'm fairly sure I forgot that actually happened. Because when I read online afterwards, before rewatching it again, I sort of read online, oh, don't you remember the hand at the start? That was the Doctor's hand, wasn't it? And I was like, I can't even remember that scene. So I'd kind of just completely forgotten that little bit at the beginning, which is probably why I didn't sort of work it out quite as quickly, if you like, as other people may have done the whole plot. But it was nice to sort of give you... This episode is full of little hints and sort of teasers as to what the whole resolution of the episode is going to be. And it's so perfectly worked, and it sort of makes it really rewarding on a rewatch as well, because then you can like try and spot all the little clues that are handed out throughout the episode to sort of what is actually going to happen. So it's really, it's sort of a very rewatchable episode, I think. It's not just, some episodes are very much, you watch them first once for the shock of it sort of thing, and the excitement of that, but then it's not a great rewatch. But I think this is a very good episode for a rewatch even. It's a hard word to say. We-watch, I can't say it. But anyway, so it's always nice when you have great episodes that have that rewatchability, I think, and this is certainly one of them. And when we get the Doctors sort of stepping out of this, what seems like a sort of exit of the teleportation device. And oh no, it really isn't. It really, really isn't. And then he steps out and gives this line about, I'm coming to find you and I'll never ever stop, which is a really nice sort of showing a bit more the rage inside, if you like, that he's got after just seeing his best friend die in front of his eyes, which can't have been much fun, I'd imagine. So he's just fueled by rage through this episode pretty much, and it is already showing right at the beginning. Now at this point I should probably mention the remarkable direction from Rachel Talali, something like that. I can't pronounce her name properly. I know she's American and I've heard it pronounced properly somewhere, but I can't remember what it was. So I'll just stick with Talali or whatever. I don't really know, whatever. But her direction in this episode is absolutely brilliant, because of the sort of way the episode is, with there only being one character, and at times you can have several minutes with very little dialogue. It means that you've got to have lots of interesting shots and sort of linking things up and moving around to try and keep the interest and keep it going a bit. And she pulls it off spectacularly. I mean, she did a really good job on Series 8 finale, of course, when she last directed. That was full of really nice direction there, and I was very pleased when I heard that she was coming back, because she's in excellent direction. She's doing Sherlock now as well, of course. Filming, I think she's in the first episode of Series 4 of Sherlock. So she's going up in the world, if you like. I'm sure some people would say that, and hopefully she'll come back in the future. But in this episode, yeah, the way that they film the mechanical castle as well, and not sort of giving it all away instantly as to what the castle looks like and what it is. You just sort of get building it up and working your way through the different parts of the castle, and just everything about her direction is really fantastic, I think. Now the castle itself is a really interesting design. I remember when I heard that, when in like the sort of preview for episodes and stuff, when I think it was a quote from Stephen Moffat saying, oh, the episode 11 is based in a mechanical castle. And I sort of thought, oh, that's always going to be a sort of historically thing. That doesn't sound really too much for me. I'm not going to particularly like that. But in actual fact, the castle, I really, really like this sort of castle idea. The idea that when the Doctor makes a confession, the castle will reset and spin around, and all the rooms will move around, which makes it difficult to find your way around if the rooms keep on moving into different places. But it's a really clever idea that Moffat came up with for this, and the actual sets of it and all look really impressive. A proper sort of castle-y look inside, even with some of them are just sets. I think they still sort of come together really well. And I also really like the idea of the automated room service, I think the Doctor called it, to where all the rooms reset back to their original condition, which I think is a great idea. It sort of cleans up after itself, this sort of castle, if you like, that just be quite useful. That if we just sort of, if all the rooms around, when you've sort of made a mess of it, if you need to just tidy your room, if only it would just do it for you, that'd be useful, wouldn't it? So that's another sort of, it's lots of new and interesting concepts, I think, because these are sort of things we haven't really had in Doctor Who before, this sort of rotating mechanical castle and the automated room service idea. I don't think we've really seen too much of Doctor Who. And what I talked about it last week as well with Sarah Dollard's episode, in terms of sort of original ideas. And I think although Steven sometimes struggles for original ideas, I think, and at times does rehash a few elements that he's talked about, that it's because naturally he's written so many episodes that it's probably quite difficult to keep on coming up with original ideas. But this is very much just sort of new and original idea, I think, for an episode, for a setting, and for a story in general, so that's always great. We have this main sort of villain of the episode, the Veil, which is just this sort of being that stalks the Doctor permanently, essentially. And of course he's played by Jamie Reed Quarrel, I think that's how you pronounce his name, who played Colony Sarf in the first couple of episodes. He returns on his little, whatever they're called, the thing you roll along on, I can't remember what they're called. No, can't remember, but whatever, you know what I mean. The thing with wheels that you sort of lean forward and it rolls along on and that kind of stuff. And he was chilling on one of those in this sort of draped in kind of almost a sort of duvet, if you like, over his head. And he just spends his days stalking the Doctor, walking around and chasing him down. And it's a really sort of, we never really know anything about it. Clearly at the end it's just a load of cogs, essentially, that have become sort of creature of some description, just turn into cogs, and that's where you get the final indications of, oh yeah, it's the confession dial, of course. And so it's an interesting sort of alien of, it's not an alien, is it? It's just a sort of, I don't really know how to describe it, frankly. It's a villain, it's sort of, yeah, there's not really any good words to describe it, I guess. The Doctor's nightmare, I guess we'll stick with that, because it's, well, as the Doctor says, he's scared of it because it's the exact thing that he was scared of in his nightmares. And now it's become a reality for him in his own torture chamber, of course, so it makes sense to have that there. And clearly it shows you there's a few fishy things going on here. And gives a slight hint that it might be the Time Lords, because they would probably know about the Doctor's memories, dreams and stuff, whereas a lot of other... Somehow I don't think other alien races would be able to work out what the Doctor used to dream about when he was a kid to make a sort of a being out of to scare him. I think that would be quite difficult, so... But there you go. And so the Veil is, yeah, a very interesting character, not interesting character, but a nice idea for a sort of stalker, if you like. If you just got your permanent stalker that will never stop, never ever, it will just keep on moving, keep on walking towards you. It'll be slower than you most of the time, but it won't stop when you stop, and it will just keep following you all your life until it goes and sucks you to death in that lovely sort of hands over the face thing that you can get some quite funny shots of Peter Capaldi from, because of the way his mouth sort of, and everything. But anyway, there you go. I like the Veil, and I really like the scene where the Doctor has a psychic link with a door, talking about how a door's always crossed because you just push through it, and it's never the door. You never want to talk to a door. The door's just to be pushed through. And although it's obviously just nonsense, really, it's still quite a nice sort of idea and concept, and you can create the Doctor can create a psychic link with a door. Cool, all good. But he opens the door, classic Doctor style. It's just a wall, and well, this is sort of where it starts getting a little bit more mysterious when the Doctor says he's scared, and the whole thing just freezes. And I do like the moment where he just flicks the fly away, just to sort of see flying out of the sort of frozenness of everything, and then of course the castle rotates around and rejigs itself, if you like, and gives the Doctor a way out, even if he had run out of corridor, as he says. And that's another. There's so many great lines in this episode. I think that's one of the greatest strengths. There's just so many lines that Stephen's written brilliantly and that Peter's delivered brilliantly. They're so Doctor-y, and they make so much sense, and they just combine to make it so brilliant, I think. And so I won't mention too many of them, because there's just so many brilliant lines in this episode, I think, that you could just... Obviously they create great sort of quotes and pictures and stuff, but even just within the episode they're just fantastic lines, I think. One of the other slightly sort of brutal things for the Doctor was that Clara portrait in that room that the Doctor had to stand and stare at just after. From his point of view, it's probably only been like half an hour since he saw her die, and now he's just got to sit there and stare at a picture of her, or a painting of her even. And of course this is where the mystery starts to sort of build even more. Why is this picture here, been here for ages, even though it looks like the Doctor's just arrived here? And it's all very mysterious. What's going on here? Oh, I wonder what it is. And well, then we get epic, clever Doctor, as well. We don't quite realise it at the time through the scene, why he sort of drops the petal, drops the little metal thing that he has in his eye, I can't remember what it's called, like sort of magnifying sort of monocle type thing, drops that on the floor, and I'm sure there's something else before he, the popping to sort of get the air density and stuff, and then obviously throwing the stool out of the window to test how far it is of a drop and that it's into water. And then of course he throws himself off a cliff, throws himself out the window, and we get a very Sherlock-esque, of course, but one of my absolute favourite scenes. I love, when I was watching this episode, that was the first, often when I watch episodes for the first time, I don't necessarily dislike them, but I don't always get that enjoyment out of them instantly unless they're sort of big shock factor or absolutely brilliant scenes in episodes. And through those first sort of 10 minutes up to this scene, it'd been good, but it hadn't really sort of grabbed my attention at that point. Although obviously I rethink it now, because when you rewatch it, you sort of develop more thoughts in it and kind of stuff. But the first time through, it's a bit different. But then when it got to this scene in the Doctor's Mind Palace, effectively, I was just instantly loving that scene. And I knew this episode is going to be brilliant when we got scenes like that. So the Doctor sort of showing off in the TARDIS and just then being just this like super clever guy that just he can do all. He's sort of been working out all these calculations in his head, thinking about a way of escaping while he's being about to be attacked by the Veil and trying to sort of think about jumping out a window. And all this stuff he's doing, when he's dropped the petal and dropping the monocle, throwing the stool out the window, and all these different things that he's done to try and work out exactly sort of how far the drop is, what he's got to do to sort of survive and this kind of stuff. And it's just brilliant, sort of giving us an insight into the Doctor's mind and how his mind works in times of disaster. And there's a good reference here. I saw someone link to it on YouTube, which I hadn't seen before, was that I'll probably put a link in the description of this video, but in the 11th Hour DVD commentary with Stephen Moffat, he has a moment where he basically describes exactly that scene about the Doctor sort of being able to do massive calculations in his head and sort of having a mind palace in his head that he sort of goes into when he's in massive danger and about to die. And it was great to see that something that Stephen had mentioned 6 years ago or 5 years ago, he'd brought in and brought into a new episode, which was sort of nice, linking it up and showing that he had a lot of these ideas. I think he'd had for a very long time for Heaven Sent. He just never really put them all to paper as one episode, I think. But he did, and look how it turned out. And of course, this Mind Palace thing is just absolutely fantastic. I think he calls it his storm room. Is it store with an E or storm with an M? I need to look at the subtitles. I'm never quite sure because of his Scottish accent. Sometimes some of the words are slightly difficult to understand from Peter, but generally it's all right. But yeah, I can't remember whether it was store or storm room. Let me know if you know, because I can't remember. But it doesn't really matter. It's basically the Doctor's Mind Palace, a la Sherlock. Of course, Stephen can steal ideas from Sherlock. Why not? Sherlock's such a great show. You might as well bring in some of the great ideas you got from that. And it's a very different sort of Mind Palace, of course, with the TARDIS, being in the TARDIS and just showing off to the back of Clara, effectively, because she's not really there anymore, is she? She's just inside the Doctor's mind. She never leaves the Doctor's mind, but she's left the real world. And well, the Doctor's sort of 0.2 seconds to impact, and he drops into the water, and it looks pretty bad at that point. Oh, I really like the clever idea, once he's in the water, and sort of the clever idea to sort of represent him kind of waking up with the TARDIS almost turning back on with the lights all switching back on. And I think that was a great idea from Stephen and great direction from Rachel to sort of showing that, sort of representing as in the TARDIS powering up is like the Doctor's sort of brain and mind and body kind of starting to power up again as well, because he's almost gone into sort of standby mode, if you like, or into deep sleep, if you like, and he's sort of having to power it back up. And it's a really, they do it sort of 2 or 3 times in the episode, and I think it's a really great sort of visual metaphor kind of thing for him. He's sort of brain turning back on again is sort of representing the TARDIS sort of turning back on as well. So I think that's another really great idea and really brilliantly shot as well. And then of course we get that shot of the Doctor lying in the sort of in the sea with all those skulls there, and that's an interesting. I think I can't remember fully, but I think when I watched it first time I didn't know that they were the Doctor's head millions of times over, or thousands of times over, or however many it is. I don't think I knew it was that. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, it's a very sort of creepy shot of the Doctor in this sea of skulls, if you like. There's just skulls everywhere, skulls all around, and that's a really sort of you wouldn't really want to be hanging around there, would you? When it doesn't look like anybody else has ever been here, and yet there's thousands and thousands of skulls of dead people lying in the sea. And I'm sure once they got a fair way through that cycle, it must have been piling up well above the water. So that would have been interesting if you could just look out on these skulls everywhere. And that would have been something quite interesting, I think. And of course another idea which I really like in the Mind Palace, if you like, the Doctor's in the TARDIS, is the sort of Clara with the blackboard, and kind of, it's basically the Doctor's subconscious. He's kind of having a conversation with his subconscious, if you like. But his subconscious knows the right sort of questions to ask, but it's sort of in the form of Clara. So it's almost bringing back Clara's sort of the Doctor-Clara relationship, and that sort of the Doctor's companion, and asking him all these questions, asking him the right questions, of course, the ones he needs to sort of do. How are you going to win, of course, which is always sort of the great classic sort of Doctor. The Doctor's sort of mantra is how are you going to get out this? How are you going to win? Really like, and of course he mentions that Clara's always the teacher. That's just how she is. She's always a teacher. Even when she's dead, she's still being a teacher to the Doctor with the blackboard and asking him lots of questions. So I thought that was yet another brilliant idea that Stephen had come up with to throw into the mix. And it's worth commenting on that because I have mentioned before how sometimes Stephen has too many ideas for an episode and then they don't get developed. But I think this episode just got the right balance. There is a lot of ideas in there, but they're all put together well enough and used enough to not feel like they're wasted or out of place or feel like you could do a whole other episode on that. I think there's lots of great ideas in here that just all combine together to sort of make the great episode, whereas sometimes there's just too many and it gets crowded, or you get some ones that aren't used at all when they really should be because they're better than the ones that are actually used. But in this episode they just all work together perfectly, I think, and that's sort of a testament to Stephen that he can do it. He just needs to do it a bit more often. Well, we get another one of the hints as well as to what's sort of going on here, and it's all still a bit mysterious in this sort of sense when the Doctor has a change of clothes, of his exact clothes, just lying next to a fire when he's come out of the sea, like it's sort of prepared for him. And of course it is prepared for him for the next time he comes around, kind of. And so that's just giving you another little hint at something's not quite right here. Something big's going on, but can't quite put your finger on it at this point. But that is, yeah, so it's a really nice scene to just sort of keep the hints and the mystery going, I think. And just give you another little hint there. Those clothes are there, you know. We've got two sets of clothes. Of course, there's seen the people did the Doctor run around naked the first time, but no, he didn't. He said there would have been some other sort of clothes there or something at the time, which he would have used, because as soon as you got the first one through, then it was fine. So he would have. They say, I think Stephen said there was just like a random set of clothes there that he would have used for that, the first run through, if you like, of the cycle. So putting away the Doctor running around naked, which would be an interesting thought. Oh, and just one little Clara moment that sort of really hurt, but I really like, is when the Doctor asks, "What would you do?" and she writes, "Same as you," and he says, and well, of course you would, and well, let's be honest, that's what got you killed. And it's just like, oh dear, that's that's she was killed being like the Doctor, and that's just so it was a really great line, I thought. Just the way that the Doctor's sort of pain and realization that that's what happened, isn't it? That's what happened. And we now get this really nice this interesting scene with the whole sort of digging into the, because there's a spade left for him and there's this nice little hole to dig into, and he's thought, well, why not, let's give it a go, let's have a little dig. I've got an hour before the veil will get anywhere near, so let's just have a little dig. And of course the veil does get near and gets a little bit touchy-feely with him, trying to stick his hands through the door, but the Doctor snaps him out of it, and then he just randomly walks off. But actually he's walking off to go underground or something. I was slightly confused how he got to, there's a couple of points where I'm slightly confused, is how he got into that, like, underneath the, sort of, coming out from the side of the grave, whatever it is in, was one thing that confused me. And the other one was when there's that shot of sort of that circular thing with a kind of like shaped, I can't remember what it is, a pentagon, hexagon, I can't remember, but that little shape missing in the middle, which is seemingly left, has been left in the, like, in the grave or something. I don't really understand why that's missing and kind of why it's relevant, if you like, what it's all about. That's what a little bit that slightly confused me, so let me know if you can sort of explain that little bit. I get most of it. Clearly it is a little bit of a complicated episode, but I get most of it. But that's just one thing I don't quite get. And of course we get another nice little scene in the Doctor's mind palace where he's kind of realising I've got to give some confessions now. And when he uses the sort of phrase "I confess," there's another quite big hint that he's in his confession dial, and we finally sort of understand exactly what the confession dial is from that point. And yeah, I'm not sure whether I got it the first time. I don't think I did, which was a bit silly of me really, because it's kind of obvious when you think about it. But I guess I'm a little bit slow. And so that was so nice. And then of course we get the first sort of proper mention of the hybrid, since of course we've had references to like a hybrid and this kind of stuff. She's a hybrid, all this. But it's the first proper mention of the hybrid and exactly what it is since The Witch is Familiar. And we finally just get a little bit of a little bit more explanation of the Doctor wasn't bored of Gallifrey, he was scared, so that's why he ran away and all this kind of stuff. Which is, it's all an interesting idea. Clearly, it's sometimes stretches it, Moffat's sort of changing of the history of the Doctor Who, and you kind of just have to sort of hope that the Doctor's just, when he says, oh, Gallifrey's a boring place, this kind of stuff, and he is actually lying throughout when he's said this for years and years and years. Actually, he was lying every single time, just because he can't bear to face the hybrid, the magical hybrid which he'd never heard of before Series 9. So of course there's nothing you do to change that now, but it is slightly frustrating at times, I find, when stuff is changed but then it's not linked, but because there don't have any references to it before, that it kind of just, it's pushing it a little bit. That's where I sort of liked Moffat's kind of like three-season arcs, if you like, that ran through most of Matt Smith's era, because then you can kind of build up ideas and give lots of references through several series, so it doesn't feel like it's a one-series idea. It came in one series and it went in one series, that it just happened for one series. I think it's better when you give a few references through lots of episodes in different series. Obviously that's difficult to do and to keep a sort of arc going that long, but it is really nice when they do that. I just sort of feel it makes it more complete and feels like it's more relevant rather than just all happening and gone in one series, which is sometimes happens and does kind of happen with the hybrid as well. We get a few nice scenes where the Doctor's sort of in full-on investigative mode, if you like, and sort of explaining about how there's 82 minutes, I believe it was, to get from one side of the castle to the other, and then he's sort of going around trying to find room 12. He's got this sort of little book out that he's drawing and writing in all the sort of where the rooms all are, but it's quite difficult because the rooms kind of move around sometimes, so it would be quite difficult to find room 12 when they're all moving around a bit. And the Doctor of course discovers his own skull. He doesn't realise it. It would be slightly strange to be holding your own head, the skull of your own head, which wouldn't be the most fun, I guess. So I'm kind of holding it now, but like another version, another copy of your own head, which would be slightly weird. And we get the bird mention written into the sort of dust on the floor, which of course is what sort of helps to trigger the Doctor's realisation a bit later on. But I'll mention that in a bit. And so it's all just these brilliant scenes that are sort of building it up and kind of increasing the mystery as the Doctor, and we sort of following the Doctor trying to work it out. He gives us lots of insightful comments as well about various things as he's going through. And I really like the quote about sort of life and death, and well, it's just slightly grim. There's two moments we know nothing about: the moment we're born and the moment we die, and talking about how we sort of stare into the eyes of dead people to see sort of what's death like, does it hurt, where do you go next, and all this kind of stuff. And it's just still these really interesting sort of slightly grim things that the Doctor likes to discuss when he's in a slightly depressed and miserable mood because he's seen Clara die. And all these different things with these brilliant lines and the setup all just build it up nicely towards the end of the episode. And the mystery is sort of increased, of course, with the Doctor's realising that the stars are all in the wrong place. So surely we should be 7,000 years into the future, not the same time. That doesn't make any sense to me. So that's all really interesting, I think, the way. And it just sort of, I feel like I might have been getting it towards that point of how actually they're all the Doctor and the whole resolution. I think I might have been starting to get it at that point. I can't remember exactly, but I think it might have been towards there when just started to work out that possibly that's the sort of thing that's going on in this episode. And so it's just so perfectly worked, I think, with all the hints and teasers and mystery and everything put together. It just works brilliantly. And while after the Doctor gives another little hybrid confession, talking about how he knows what the hybrid is, he's scared of the hybrid, it's some sort of legend of Gallifrey, this creature and stuff, whatever. We never really get any good explanation with the hybrid. We never get a proper hybrid, but that's for Hellbent. That's for next week. I'll talk about that next week. That's it for the hybrids now, really, other than the cliffhanger. But we get into room 12, finally the Doctor discovers it, leaves it because then he has to get the castle rotating around to the right point, and then he can head inside. And he heads up to this magical wall of Asbantium with home written onto the side of it. And well, at that point when he said home, I was certain that would be Gallifrey, but then they just decided to put a little bit of doubt on it by saying, oh, the TARDIS, just one confession away. Because I guess for the Doctor, the TARDIS would be home, and from his point of view, Gallifrey is still lost, and so he doesn't expect to find it, so he expects home means the TARDIS, really, which is completely understandable. And just sort of, for the people who hadn't read the spoilers, keeps the mystery going of where's he going to get, if he gets out, where's he going to be. Keeps it going a bit longer, because obviously I knew it was Gallifrey. We'd all seen, well, I'd seen the synopsis. It was all very annoying, frankly, that we did find out, but there you go, we found out, and so. But I didn't really take anything away from the episode for me. I think it's still a great sort of ending, I think. But I'll come to that a bit later on. So we have that moment, the Doctor's moment of realisation, which I think is done so brilliantly as a shot. It sort of comes from quite a long way and then just pans in with these sort of the shocks of as he sort of realises that's what I've got to do. This is what's going to happen. This is what I've been doing, and he just realises and he's sort of almost terrified. He can't face the fact that he's going to have to do this, and he really needs that boost from Clara, which he gets. And so it's such a great shot, and the way they film it with the sort of realisation of what he's got to do. And then he gets to run around in his mind palace a bit more, have a little bit of a scream and a, why is it always me? Why do I always have to do these things? Can't I just lose? Can't I just give up? It'd be easy. So easy to just give up. I'm sure we think about that in life a lot. It'd be so easy just to not do this, just to give up on it, just to leave it behind. It'd be so much easier. But we have to do these things. And there's that also, of course, there's a really nice scene with Clara, but there's also that scene just before where the Doctor sort of breaks down a bit, really, just letting the sort of emotion of losing Clara get to him, and that he remembers everything about it. He can remember it all, and he'd prefer to sort of forget everything that has happened to Clara, and well, he does. Whatever your thoughts are on that. But in this episode, it really just shows that pain that he has, and then of course we get that lovely Clara cameo. I know some people were like, oh, Clara's back as a disaster, but I thought it was really nice. It wasn't anything over the top, it was just a couple of lines. It was what the Doctor needed to just get himself going, and to kind of get himself motivated, and just get himself to know he's got to do this. He's got to break through this Asbantium. He's got to sacrifice himself again, effectively. And so it's just a really lovely moment where we get to see Clara's face, because of course we're just in the back of her head, effectively, for the whole episode. And so it's nice. Just that one shot, one line, pretty much. Get off of your arse and win. It's interesting to see them they use bitch in, which is familiar, going for arse as well. All Moffat's making it a grown-up show now with all these bad words and stuff. Somehow I don't think that would have been berated by Mary. What's her face from the 70s? Waterhouse, is it? Something like that. I can't remember her name. But you know, the one who hated all Doctor Who, basically, and all the bad stuff. And I'm sure she would have had a field day on that if that had been out in the 70s. So there you go. So that is a really nice scene between the Doctor and Clara. Just those, even if it's just the Doctor effectively talking to his subconscious, it's still a really nice moment, and it gives him that push. So we get that moment of the Doctor smashing the Asbantium through. Looks like the most painful experience you could ever have, really. Like, it's like 400 times harder than Diamond or something. So I'm sure that'd be fun to just start punching away at for all of a couple of minutes while the Vale's walking up to you. And he starts off this sort of shepherd boy story, or the Brothers Grimm, I think it is. Grimm Tales, or whatever you want to call it, I can't remember exactly. But it's sort of, that story is brilliant as a way of sort of showing the progress through the montage, I think, which I'll come to in a second. And so it was sort of really clever from Moffat to use this sort of story idea, which is basically explaining what he's doing, but then it works so perfectly in the montage as well. And of course, by this point, I was working it out pretty much. I think a lot of people were working it out by this point. when the doctor's kind of kills effectively with the Veil's hands on him and sort of crushing his face, and lovely shots of Peter Capaldi's sort of weird sort of facial expressions of that, which is slightly interesting. And then we get yet another Mind Palace shot. Gotta love those. Some of my favourite things. And the TARDIS turning back on again, which is another one of my favourite ideas from this episode, with this, all the lights around the back turning back on, which was really nice. And then the Doctor sort of gives us a 5-minute explanation of exactly what's been going on, and it's great combining those shots with the sort of shots of this Doctor crawling in pain, approaching death, frankly. And well, I was quite surprised they went so full on with the sort of graphic sort of blood and gore all over the sort of left-hand side of him, effectively, which is. I was surprised there weren't more complaints about that. That's the sort of thing you'd usually get a Daily Mail article, or some people all going, "Oh, this is horrible. This is meant to be a kids show. You can't do all this sort of stuff." So I was surprised they didn't really get too much of that. But it was really great sort of scene building up to the montage sequence, if you like, with the Doctor crawling through painfully slowly through the castle to try and get back to that teleporter room, as the Doctor's giving us this all explanation of sort of exactly what he's got to do. And also the nice bit about how when we're too injured to regenerate, our cells sort of keep on trying, and they sort of keep the Time Lord alive for a little bit longer, and that's why they like to die among their own people. It's all nice sort of continuity stuff, that they like to die among their own people because they don't necessarily die as quickly as normal people, even if they're too injured to regenerate. So of course at this point apparently the Doctor is, we don't really know exactly what the injuries are or anything really from the Veil. It just seems to be some sort of I don't know, I can't describe it really. This steam sort of coming up off the Veil's hands on the Doctor's face, so it's kind of like burning his face off or something. I don't know really. It's hard to say. But whatever, it's all an interesting idea and continuity for the whole of the show, really, about why Time Lords like to sort of die on Gallifrey or around other Time Lords, because they understand when to kill them, basically, when to bury them and burn them or whatever you want to do with them. And so that's all very nice, and we get the sort of 3D printer metaphor, I think it is, where living matter is transmitted kind of through this teleporter thing to create a new copy. And it's such an amazing idea. Of course, you can look at it as this isn't the original Doctor anymore. This isn't the one who played the first 10, because of course when 11 rebooted the universe, and he kind of get sort of plucked out of Amy's memories or something back into existence, so it's probably a different version there, like it's a different version of Earth as well when the time was rebooted. So of course you can say, oh, it's not the same Doctor anymore, it's just a copy of him, but whatever, it's the Doctor as far as we're concerned. It's all fine for me. And well, it's such a great idea that he keeps the teleporter and the looping and keeping sort of having to do it over and over and over and over and over again. And we get the most brilliantly edited montage sequence I think you'll ever see, which is just so perfect with the music, which I'll come on to very soon, is just perfectly sort of linked up without dragging or without feeling like you're going through it too fast. You get the build up of sort of speed as you get through more and more of it, and the very handy and clearly obviously placed in progression of the sort of when the Doctor's saying, oh, I've been here for 7,000 years, oh actually it's 20,000 years, 100,000 years, 500,000 years, something I think it was, then it was 1 million, 20 million, almost 1 billion, well over 1 billion I think it was, and almost 2 billion I think was where we got up to. Of course it's apparently actually 4.5 billion, as we've learned in Hellbent, but we don't get very close to that, whatever, doesn't really matter. So that really lends itself to the progression of the montage and making it clear that it's not just literally the same thing repeating over and over again. There is that sense of progression. And then of course with the shot of the Asbantium being more and more destroyed, and the Doctor getting more and more through his story about the shepherd boy and the bird sharpening its beak on this mountain of pure diamond. I can almost recite that now, because I've seen it and heard it so many times, just because it's so great and brilliant. And just the whole thing with the speeding up of the sort of shots, you get different shots in lots of the first few. They don't pick the same shots to repeat each time. You pick different shots, and then you start speeding them up and speeding them up and speeding up until you're barely just like almost just a couple of frames of each one, just like flash, 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 through each of the sort of all through basically recapping the episode over and over and over again, loads and loads of times. And then we finally get through that final bit as the Doctor punches through that final bit of Asbantium and breaks through the breaking the cycle, breaking the wall, and makes it through, and then this magical white light shining through, and the veil just collapses into lots of cogs and discs and this kind of stuff, which is showing that he was never really a proper sort of being. He was just this mechanical thing that's part of the torture chamber, as they like to call it. And the Doctor sort of steps out of this little... It almost looks like a crack in time, but it's not. It's the confession dial, which was a fantastic idea, I think. And I'm fairly certain I didn't realise it until that point when we saw the confession dial lying on the floor, that it was actually going to be the Doctor inside the confession dial. It was almost more of a shock to me almost than the Gallifrey reveal, because I kind of knew that was coming. And so it was such a great satisfying moment, really, to see the confession dial back and to understand how relevant the confession dial was, exactly what it was and what he's been through in it. And it sort of makes so much perfect sense. So that was a great moment to have that back, I think, and to have the confession dial link in so perfectly to the arc in the end. And when we get that sort of kid, presumably some Gallifreyan kid or whatever, who's just chilling there, and the Doctor's giving these critting messages. Go to the city. Tell them I'm back. Tell them I know what I did, and I know what they did. If they ask me who I am, tell them I came the long way round, which was just such a brilliant link into Day of the Doctor, of course. I mean, that's the sort of continuity that I love in Doctor Who. Linking the lines back, it's nothing over the top. It makes perfect sense. I came the long... And it's just... He did come... And it's almost like he planned it from the Day of the Doctor when he said, I'm going home the long way round. He did go home through 4.5 billion years of a cycle. He came the long way round, so it's just... It's genius from Moffat, really, the way he links that all in so perfectly to previous episodes and to the current episode and just everything. It works so brilliantly. And then, of course, we get that lovely panning shot across to the Gallifrey City, which we haven't seen since Day of the Doctor and haven't really seen at all in New Who in real terms, in sort of current real life, if you like, after the war, post-war. I was not going to lie, I was slightly disappointed that they didn't use This Is Gallifrey or a variation of the Gallifrey theme when they did a reveal. It was such a minor thing, but it just would have been nice to sort of bring back the Gallifrey theme for a reveal of Gallifrey is back. And it wasn't the most sort of over-the-top thing that they could have gone with, sort of shots like panning all around it and this kind of stuff. It was just a nice sort of over in the corner, there it is, it's back, this is brilliant. Because for proper fans, seeing Gallifrey again is a big enough thing. You don't have to go over the top with silly shots and way too bombastic music and this kind of stuff. You don't need to do that with Gallifrey because it's such a big thing, I think. Although I was very disappointed with the BBC announcer who came on in the credits and said, oh, if you didn't realise what's just happened, wait for the next time trailer and then you'll be excited. And it's just like, come on guys. I think most people knew what that was, or there would have been someone sitting in the room with the people watching it who would have been able to point out, that's Gallifrey. I mean, it's a fairly iconic looking setting, and since New Who, it's been always looking like that since we first saw it in somewhere in Series 3. It might have been Gridlock when we first saw it, or was it just the discussions of it then? I can't quite remember. But it's always looked like that, and there's lots of fairly strong hints in the dialogue as to what it is, so I don't think you need to sort of say, oh, don't worry if you didn't work out what that was. Well, you'll be so excited when you see the next time trailer at the end, because then you'll realise actually what it is, even though everybody's already realised, so that was slightly disappointing. But it's nothing to do with the episode, it's just silly BBC announcers, really. So that wasn't a problem. And so Gallifrey's back, it's all pretty exciting, everybody's pretty hyped, and then we get that last scene, building into the cliffhanger, where the Doctor's talking about how nothing's half time or nothing's half Dalek. The Daleks wouldn't allow that. The hybrid destined to rule Gallifrey puts on his sunglasses. Is me! And cliffhanger, to be continued, credits, and it's not quite on the level of what Stephen Moffat was building up, this whopper of a cliffhanger since June 2014 or whatever it was, when he made the quote, before Series 8 even. So I'm not quite sure what he was trying to hype up with a cliffhanger, because it was a very good cliffhanger, but it wasn't the most greatest one ever. You'll never see that coming. I mean, my brother was sitting next to me, and literally he was almost sort of saying the lines the Doctor's about to say before he said them. He just knew he was going to say, the hybrid is me. I'm sure a lot of people knew that he was going to say that. And then, of course, we got all the sort of, oh, it's actually a capital M on the subtitles to suggest that it's actually me, Ashilda. No, it's not. It's just the Doctor, and that's how it is. And so there you go. So that was, it wasn't quite the sort of whopper of a cliffhanger that Moffat was supposedly making, and I think it would have been better if if Gallifrey hadn't been spoiled, then it could have been an epic cliffhanger, because you could have combined that without being a massive shock. You could have combined that shock with sort of the hybrid is me line, and then it would have worked really well, I think. But it was just because Gallifrey had been spoiled for so many people by the silly BBC's press people, and then releasing synopsises and stuff, which was just also silly to do that. It was just, you didn't need it. You didn't need to tell us that Gallifrey was going to be in the finale a month before the finale came, before the finale was going to be shown. It's just sort of ruining the excitement a little bit, really. So that was a bit frustrating, but it didn't really put the episode on a downer at all. And it finishes with a bang, I think it's fair to say. And well, of course, I have to mention the mighty Murray Gold and his magnificent score for this episode. Hopefully when you're watching this video, the score, the Heaven Sent, the Series 9 soundtrack will be out, and you'll be able to listen to some clean music from Heaven Sent, because at the moment it isn't when I'm recording this, and I can't, I'm just stuck with all the unreleased stuff. But even so, I've said it before and I'll say it again, it is Murray Gold's best score for a Doctor Who episode ever, as far as I'm concerned. I've heard all the soundtracks for all of the New Who series, I've heard them many, many times, and this is completely the best one for me, by a long shot. I mean, he combines it so well, the sort of the interesting sounds that he brings in, and the sort of piano-y based, almost orchestra style, sort of almost Beethoven style, I think, as well, that he brought in, which is so different to anything else we get in Doctor Who in terms of music. You never get anything like that. It's so, so rare to have that style of music in Doctor Who. But it works so perfectly within the context of the episode, and sort of making it almost royal, if you like, a little bit. And with the Doctor's red velvet jacket and the sort of serious royal look almost, I think that style of music works really well with this episode. And well, the breaking the cycle music for the montage sequence, it's a variation of This Time There's Three of Us, but it's so good. It's just an absolutely epic track, really. It's annoying at the moment for me, at least. I can't hear a fully clean version. I've just got the DVD menu music with a 1 minute sort of extract of it. But as a track, it is just so utterly brilliant, I think. And well, that whole suite, sort of from when the Doctor enters room 12 through to the end of the episode, hopefully we'll just have a release of the whole of that bit, because that bit is just should be put for award. The whole thing just is so brilliant. Everything about it is so brilliant. The whole part of it it's yeah. Can't really gush about it enough, if you like, because it's just so good. So well done, Murray Gold, on a fantastic score, and hopefully when you're watching this you'll be able to listen to a clean version of a lot of the Heaven Sent score, but you never know, really, you never know. And well, that's near enough it for this Doctor Who review. Heaven Sent is the most incredible episode. As far as I'm concerned, it's a 10 out of 10. It is the best episode ever for me. I'm sure lots of people will disagree. I know lots of people think it's a great episode, but I'm sure lots of people will say it's not the best ever. But for me, it is my favourite episode ever. I just think everything about it is so brilliant, and everything just works so perfectly. The direction, the music, the acting, the script, it all just comes together perfectly to create such a brilliant finished product and finished episode. And it's hats off to Stephen Moffat, hats off to Rachel Talalay, hats off to Murray Gold, and most of all, hats off to Peter Capaldi for the most stunning performance that you could ever wish for, really. And it's so frustrating that he's probably not going to get any sort of award for it, really. And that's the disappointment, that people have just overlooked Doctor Who Series 9 for any awards, really. I mean, how can you watch that episode and not think that's such a brilliant acting performance? It's very disappointing. So we've got to show the love for Peter Capaldi, show him that he was so brilliant in that. If the awards people won't do it, then us fans have got to do it instead, and show him that he's such a great Doctor and so great in this episode. Well, so great, just generally, really. And that's pretty much it for this video. Like the video, let me know what you thought of Heaven Sent. Surely you think it's a brilliant episode. I mean, if you've got some legit reasons as to why you don't like it, I'll read them and I'll try and respond to them and see if I can turn your opinion, if you like. But if not, maybe you just don't like it. But I'm sure for the majority of us, it's such a brilliant episode. So let me know what you thought. Subscribe if you're new here, and follow me on Twitter, of course, for all my latest Doctor Who updates on various videos I'm recording and just my general thoughts on Doctor Who. And I'll see you this time next week for my review of Hellbent. Goodbye.